Quintus Tullius Cicero, Praetor 62 B.C.E. Quintus Tullius Cicero was the younger and less famous brother of the orator Marcus Tullius Cicero, who was consul in 63 B.C.E. Quintus was born in 102 B.C.E., making him 3 to 4 years younger than Marcus. The two brothers grew up in a wealthy equestrian family in Arpinum, about 100 miles removed from Rome. Their father, who had the wealth and connections to join the Senate, had entertained political ambitions as a young man, but he was plagued by poor health and never went to Rome to pursue politics. Since he could not fulfill his own political ambitions, the elder Cicero used his wealth to ensure that Marcus and Quintus received the finest education possible. Marcus received instruction in politics at Rome, rhetoric at Rhodes, and philosophy at Athens, and it seems very likely that Quintus received an almost identical course of instruction a few years after his brother. In 70 BCE, Quintus Cicero married Pompania, the sister of Titus Pomponius Atticus, a wealthy and influential friend and correspondent of the Cicero brothers, who chose to live the life of a scholar in Athens rather than to pursue a political career in Rome. According to the clearly biased testimony of Marcus Cicero, Pompania was an exceptionally strong-willed woman, and she and Quintus frequently butted heads over the years. While we don't know precisely when Quintus Cicero was elected quaestor and entered the Senate, we do know that he held the office of aedile in 66 BCE. That same year, Quintus and Pompania had a son named Quintus Tullius Cicero. Interestingly, Marcus's son was named Marcus Tullius Cicero. In 62, the year after his brother held the consulship, Quintus served as praetor and then spent 3 years as pro-praetor in Asia from 61 to 59 BCE. While many Romans of the late Republic would have used their authority as governor to enrich themselves in order to run for the consulship, Quintus governed fairly and without corruption, even if he did show flashes of harshness on occasion. Most of Quintus's career from this point forward would largely involve him serving as a legate and then being a minor political figure in a drama where he was a bit player at best. Part of the reason for the stymieing of his political fortunes is that there was a great deal of popular blowback against Marcus Cicero for his use of the Senatus Consultum Ultimum against Catiline in 63, which, in addition to leading to a short exile for Marcus, must have made it difficult to be an ambitious politician bearing the name Cicero. The other probable reason for Quintus's midlife transformation into a long-term legate was most likely the rise of the First Triumvirate. Marcus Cicero was able to make his peace with Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus in exchange for his services as a defense attorney for their lackeys and a voice in the Senate and tribal assembly for their causes. In exchange, it seems reasonable that Quintus was allowed to participate as a legate in Gaul. It also seems probable that Quintus sought out this assignment as it would burnish his own reputation and give him a strong personal relationship with one of the triumvirs. At any rate, whatever Quintus's original motives or long-term personal ambitions, he would prove to be an excellent legate for Julius Caesar during the Gallic Wars. While he did not achieve the same level of success as Titus Labienus in Gaul, Quintus Cicero performed competently throughout his time in Gaul. The younger Cicero commanded a legion and was often entrusted with maintaining winter quarters on his own in some dangerous areas in Gaul, including garrisoning in the district of the fearsome Nervii the winter after Caesar's second expedition to Britain in 54 BCE. A rebellion broke out, and one camp under another legate was overrun and destroyed. Cicero's camp was hit by surprise by an overwhelming force at a time when Quintus was ill. Nonetheless, Quintus braved the elements and the vast numbers arrayed against him to lead his men in strengthening their camp defenses and holding steady until Caesar could arrive. Resisting the offer of favorable terms from Gallic leaders that he had made friends with, Quintus braved a circumvallation since the Gallic tribes now understood Roman siegecraft well enough to emulate Roman methods. On the siege's 7th day, a strong wind blew, and the Gauls took advantage of this to spread a fire in the Roman camp and attempt to storm the walls while the camp's interior burned. Surprisingly, Caesar's men stayed at their post, or Cicero's men, stayed at their post, and fought off the onslaught while their possessions, and most likely their food, burned behind them. One cohort managed to seize a Gallic siege tower and rain down fire from it into the enemy flank. Two centurions displayed incredible valor during this action as they made a bold attack, slew many Gauls, and then withdrew unharmed. The two otherwise unknown commoners were named Lucius Vorenus and Titus Pullo, known to us only because Caesar praised their valor in his commentary on the Gallic War. The situation was growing more desperate as Quintus Cicero was struggling to man the walls with an ever-increasing number of men wounded. Given Caesar's non-appearance at that juncture, Quintus realized that his previous messengers must not have managed to break through to Caesar's camp. Quintus turned to one of his trusted Nervii friends in the camp and told him to get a message to Caesar. This messenger concealed his message in his spear and managed to reach Caesar's camp before nightfall of the day that he was dispatched. Caesar summoned the relatively nearby commands of the younger Crassus, Titus Labienus, and Gaius Fabius and ordered them all to make for Quintus's camp with due haste. Labienus's force was detained by enemy activity, so Caesar was only able to bring 2 legions to the territory of the Nervii and planned to rely on his speed to overcome the enemy's numbers. Caesar sent a message in Greek to Quintus, which the messenger shot at the wall, where it remained unnoticed for 2 full days. On the 3rd day, someone on guard finally noticed it and brought it to Quintus, who read it to his men and restored morale. The message was sent in Greek, of course, because the Gauls, while they had some exposure to Latin, would have had no reason to know Greek. Soon thereafter, the Gauls noticed Caesar's approach and broke off their siege of Cicero's camp in order to fight Caesar. Cicero quickly dispatched his same trusted messenger to let Caesar know that the full force of up to 60,000 Gauls was massing to come at him. This gave Caesar the time and wherewithal to choose a defensive position from which he was able to defy the odds with his 2 legions and win an impressive victory, and then link up with Cicero. When he arrived at Quintus's camp, Caesar tells us that he was amazed by the valor of both Cicero and his men, since the enemy siege works were truly impressive and Cicero's legion had fought so fiercely that only 10% of the men in the ranks were fit for duty. Given the disasters that had befallen 2 of his other subordinates that winter, Caesar was happy to have a hero, and it is hard to imagine a more convenient hero than Quintus Cicero. Taken as a whole, the winter had been a disaster, and Caesar's praise for Quintus's actions may have helped keep Marcus loyal to the Gallic war effort and ensured that Caesar received additional forces and resources to replace his lost legionaries. This was, however, to be the peak of Quintus Cicero's military career, and he would lose some of his new military prestige the next year. Caesar entrusted Quintus with the command of the newly raised 14th Legion and the defense of his main camp. Cicero was given strict instructions to keep a tight guard and not let his men stray far from camp, lest the marauding Germans take advantage of the opening. After several days of inactivity, Cicero was convinced that Caesar was being overly cautious, and he gave his men permission to forage. With half of his force out of camp, the Germans struck the camp and nearly carried it. The inexperienced recruits of the 14th Legion didn't know what to do, and Caesar says that they were looking for someone to guide them, but never received the direction that they needed. While he doesn't name Quintus Cicero in this connection of being guilty of failing to provide that leadership, the condemnation of Cicero's conduct is clear enough. While Caesar did chastise Cicero for breaking his orders, no real harm was done, and in fact, Cicero's era had actually lured the enemy out into battle, and that enabled Caesar to fight and win the battle that he had been seeking all along. After the events of 54 to 53, Quintus Cicero didn't play a prominent part in Caesar's subsequent campaigns, although he is mentioned as a legate commanding a legion in the winter quarters during the winter of 52 to 51 following Caesar's great victory at Alesia. In 51 B.C.E., Quintus's service under Caesar came to an end when his brother Marcus was finally forced to serve as the proconsular governor in an assignment that he had been putting off for about 12 years. After you served as consul, you were expected to be a proconsul, and Marcus Cicero had no real interest in leaving Rome, but now he was forced to. Marcus was assigned to govern Cilicia, which was beset by bandits, a fairly normal occurrence in the region during antiquity, and this danger was exacerbated by a revolt in nearby Syria in the wake of Crassus's defeat at Carrhae in 53. In addition, Cicero was ordered to help his neighbor Ariobarzanes III maintain his hold on the kingdom of Cappadocia. In short, Marcus would be likely to face military action, and given his own disinclination and disinterest for such things, he chose to employ Quintus as his legate and chief deputy. The older Cicero used fair treatment, the restitution of stolen property, and diplomacy to keep things as quiet as possible. The two brothers campaigned together near Mount Amanus against some brigands and managed to defeat them completely. While Quintus undoubtedly did all of the hard work in this short campaign, it was his older brother who was hailed as Imperator, victorious general, by the troops following the battle. Soon after the Cicero brothers returned to Rome, the civil war between Caesar and Pompey broke out. Like his brother, Quintus allied himself with the Pompeian faction. Despite his recent military experience and his familiarity with Caesar as a commander, Quintus does not seem to have been entrusted with anything important. A couple of factors militated against any ambitions that Quintus may have had of winning Civil War glory. First, Marcus sat in camp grousing and wisecracking all day, something that did not endear him to his fellow senior senators who made decisions about appointments and commands. Second, Quintus had never served as consul, and the men who followed Pompey were arch-traditionalists who rated rank above ability. Even Titus Labienus, who was a far better general than Quintus, was given very few chances to shine during this conflict, even though he served for the war's duration. Quintus was pardoned by Caesar after Pharsalus, and took no further part in the civil wars. Aside from his divorce from Pomponia in 45, we don't hear much else about Quintus's activities during these years. On March 15, 44 BCE, Caesar was assassinated, and the assassins recruited Marcus Cicero to their cause. We don't know what Quintus's thoughts were at this time, but he presumably supported his brother's verbal assaults on Mark Antony. When Antony, Lepidus, and Marcus's young friend Octavian formed the Second Triumvirate, one of the key components of the deal was that Cicero had to die for what he had said about Antony and how he had provoked Octavian to fight him in the first place. Although they had not delivered Philippics, Quintus was also added to the proscription list. His son and namesake helped him hide, but he was threatened with torture by the men sent out to kill the elder Quintus, so Quintus decided to reveal himself in an attempt to save his son's life. In the event, both men named Quintus Tullius Cicero ended up being murdered. Although Quintus Cicero's political career fell short of being illustrious when compared to many other Romans of his time, we know enough about Quintus Cicero the man to form a reasonably full picture of his personality and interest. The first thing that the course of his career makes clear is that he was a far more traditional Roman than his brother. Far from eschewing military adventures to pursue civilian life, Quintus Cicero was a seasoned soldier who served almost continuously as a legate under Caesar and then under his brother for about a decade. Interestingly, Quintus's interest in the military life seems to have only really started when he was around 40 years old. While Quintus's one surviving major work makes it seem likely that he had a bit of his brother's condescension, there is some reason to believe that Quintus was actually better at making friends than Marcus, as we know that Marcus frequently got on the nerves of his contemporaries, while we never hear any similar complaints about his brother. Based on the way that Marcus Cicero and Julius Caesar describe him, Quintus had the virtues of being a great leader of men, he possessed physical courage in the face of danger, and he was exceptionally honest and uncorrupted. On the other hand, Marcus complained that his younger brother was prone to act out of anger or to act with more harshness than the situation demanded at times. Quintus was something of a traditionalist when it came to punishing crimes, as he invoked Roman tradition by having a patricide scourged and then sewn into a sack with wild animals and cast into a river while he was pro-praetor. This was the traditional punishment for patricide. Later, when he was working under his brother in Cilicia, Cicero complained in a letter to Atticus that he always had to watch out for his brother to make sure that he wasn't doing anything that would provoke hostility from the natives, since his brother did like to use harsher means than Marcus thought were appropriate. Although they seem to have had some arguments along the way, the correspondence between the Cicero brothers shows that they remained close throughout their adult lives. Both brothers had tense and difficult marriages, and both of them ended up getting divorced. It appears that Marcus tried to mediate between Quintus and Pomponia at one point, but to no avail, as they were divorced after 25 years of marriage in 45 BCE. Like his brother, Quintus had aspirations of becoming a renowned writer and fancied himself a poet and tragedian. In the 50s, after Marcus Cicero wrote a laughable epic about his time as consul, Quintus also felt the call of the Muses, and possibly also the god of sibling rivalry, and wrote several poems and 4 Greek-style tragedies, all now lost. Based on the absence of any known mockery of Quintus's compositions, we can hazard a guess that the younger Cicero was a better poet, even if he could not match his brother in any other intellectual endeavor. Interestingly enough, Quintus composed his tragedies while he was serving in Gaul under Caesar. One assumes that, like Caesar, Quintus Cicero stayed busy while in winter quarters by attending to his writing. Unlike Marcus, who was the greatest orator that Rome had ever produced, we know nothing of Quintus's prowess as a speaker, so presumably he was not good enough to be worthy of mention, while being competent enough to avoid ridicule. Despite falling short of Rome's highest office, Quintus seems to have been every bit the political junkie that his older brother was, and seems to have viewed himself as an expert on how to win elections. While Marcus Cicero left behind a large corpus of writings varying in genre from personal letters to forensic oratory to philosophical dialogues, Quintus Cicero only has a handful of surviving works. 3 of Quintus's letters to Cicero's meticulous secretary Tiro have survived. Quintus's best-known work, although both its authorship and authenticity have been disputed, is the Commentariolum Petitionis, or Handbook on Electioneering. In this booklet, which purportedly dates to 64 BCE when Marcus Cicero was seeking the office of consul, Quintus engages in a pedantic, step-by-step explanation of how to attain Rome's highest office. While we must assume that Quintus's work did not contain any tidbits that a seasoned Roman politician wouldn't already know, it is certainly interesting for modern scholars who try to reconstruct what Roman politics were like and how ambitious Romans went about seeking offices and honors. Quintus Tullius Cicero lived in a turbulent time when the sheer amount of money in politics made it difficult for a new man to make it very far in politics. While his brother's name helped him early on, it quite possibly made his advancement to the top impossible. If the ultimate mark of success for a new man was the consulship, then the praetorship is a decent consolation prize. Quintus's career was shaped by his famous brother, who cast an inescapable shadow, but Quintus was still his own man. If we take into consideration that Quintus Cicero went down in history as a war hero, wrote a text that survived to the present, and died with honor and dignity, then we are left with a portrait of a successful, dutiful, and complex, and complete Roman.